One borrowed dress is a favor, but borrowed dresses that never come back? That's not fashion drama. That's a quiet accusation that slices reputations in half, and Victoria Beckham just made it impossible to ignore. Let's stop dressing this up like it's miscommunication or a mix-up. The way this story is being framed behind the scenes is simple and brutal. Victoria says items were loaned, they were not returned, and the connection went cold. No cute PR spins, no warm follow-up calls, just silence and a wardrobe hole that never got filled. And here's why this hits so hard. Victoria Beckham doesn't pop off for entertainment. She moves like a vault. She stays polished, controlled, selective. So if she's ever on record even hinting that someone took loaned pieces and didn't return them, it's because she's past the stage of playing nice. Because in high fashion, borrowing is not casual. It's not try it on and keep it if you feel like it. It's not influencer free-for-all. Or a designer loan is logged, tracked, and assigned like evidence. Assistants sign for it. Stylists are responsible for it. Teams build entire systems around it because if something vanishes, the designer doesn't just lose fabric, somebody down the chain gets blamed, embarrassed, or even fired. That's the part the public never sees. So when Victoria says dresses were borrowed and not returned, the subtext is loud. This wasn't a cute social slip. This was a professional violation that can scorch people who weren't even in the photos. And it reportedly wasn't one small piece tossed into a garment bag and forgotten. We're talking serious value items, coats, dresses, boots, handbags, premium pieces loaned during a time when trust is everything and access is currency. This wasn't help from a brand. This was one powerful woman opening her world to another with the assumption that respect would be mutual. That's what makes it sting. Victoria didn't need to help. She did it anyway. According to the narrative circulating around this mess, Meghan sought guidance, style, image, the unwritten rules of looking elite without trying too hard. Victoria allegedly responded with generosity, lending designs quietly, professionally, without making it a public flex. No loud campaign. No look at me. Just assistance. But then the mood shifts, and this is where it stops being fashion and becomes power. Because the whispers say Meghan's attitude changed once she clocked how wealthy and connected the Beckhams really are. The kind of influence that doesn't need titles to open doors. And when that reality landed, what started as friendliness allegedly started curdling into distance. Distance into suspicion. Suspicion into sharp accusations that made everything toxic. And while that social frost was spreading, the clothes still weren't coming back. Now pause right there, because this is where the story gets uglier. A beauty-related item reportedly appears in the press. Nothing nuclear, nothing that screams scandal. But Meghan allegedly decides she knows exactly who leaked it. And who does she suspect? Victoria. Not with proof, not with receipts. Just a gut feeling and a reaction that escalates fast. The allegation floating around is that Prince Harry confronted David Beckham directly. Picture that moment, two worlds colliding and one side basically saying, "We know it was you." And the Beckhams deny it, flatly. But here's the detail that makes people's jaws tighten. While accusations are being thrown about leaks, the loaned items still aren't returned. So from Victoria's side, how does that look? It looks like this. You take my work, you keep my work, and then you accuse me of betrayal. That is a level of entitlement that makes even the calmest person start choosing their words carefully, because once you say it out loud, you can't take it back. And then came the wedding moment that social circles never forget. Yes, the Beckhams attended. They showed up. They did the public support part. But when the exclusive evening reception happened, they weren't invited. And insiders claim Victoria was insulted, not because she was desperate for access, but because the message was clear: you were useful until you weren't. That's what stings in elite rooms, not rejection. Not missing a party. It's the humiliation of being treated like a service, not a relationship. And behind the scenes, while the public watched fairy tale angles, the practical reality kept grinding. Requests were reportedly made for the return of the loan pieces, and what came back was delay after delay. Excuses, deflection, the kind of stalling that tells you the answer without saying the answer. That's when it reportedly clicked for Victoria's camp. Meghan didn't treat those items like loans. She treated them like perks. And once you're labeled perk-minded in fashion, it's not just one designer who remembers. It spreads like perfume through the industry. Quiet, fast, and impossible to wash off. Because fashion doesn't scream at you in public. It punishes you privately. And this is where the bigger pattern starts forming. The script floating around says this behavior didn't stop with Victoria. It echoed into other spaces, including a high-profile shoot later on where inventory allegedly came up missing after the fact. And when that rumor hit, it didn't land as a random accident. It landed as confirmation for everyone who already had that uneasy feeling. Because once a narrative becomes items go missing around you, you don't just fight a rumor, you fight the chilling effect. Designers start tightening access. Stylists start locking racks. Publications start curating what you're allowed to touch. And the scariest part? You usually don't find out you've been quietly cut off until you're standing there smiling, asking for options, and suddenly the options aren't there anymore. Because once the whispers about missing pieces harden into expectations, the fashion world didn't panic, it adjusted. And that's the part most people never understand. There is no dramatic announcement, no blacklist email, no phone call saying you're done. What happens instead is far more surgical. Requests start getting lost. Availability suddenly disappears. Samples that once arrived overnight now require internal review. Stylists smile, nod, and offer nothing. And according to insiders, that shift began right after the Beckham fallout solidified into something colder than a misunderstanding. Because from Victoria's side, the logic was brutal and simple. If I loaned items professionally, followed protocol, trusted the process, and still had to chase my own work, then trust itself was the problem. That's when the rules changed. The next situation reportedly happened during a high-profile shoot, one meant to signal power, polish, and post-royal reinvention. Racks arrived, garments were cataloged, assistants hovered, everything was logged, everything was counted. Because by then, the industry had learned something it never says out loud: always count twice. And after the shoot wrapped, something was missing. Not a sock, not a pen, a piece. And suddenly, the story that had once been whispered behind hands had teeth, because this time there were witnesses. This time there were inventory lists. This time there was no social grace left to hide behind. When inquiries were made, the response reportedly wasn't panic, it was justification. That's the detail that made insiders stiffen. Not, oh my God, let us fix this, not we'll return it immediately, but a tone that suggested entitlement. As if the value of exposure outweighed the value of the item itself, as if being worn once somehow converted a loan into a souvenir. And in fashion, that attitude is radioactive, because exposure doesn't pay ateliers. Exposure doesn't replace craftsmanship. Exposure doesn't explain why a designer's archive is missing a piece that cost months of labor and tens of thousands to produce. That's when people stopped giving grace. And this is where the infamous green gown reappearance enters the picture. Months later, a dress surfaces. Familiar, recognizable, whispered about in private chats long before it ever hits the public eye. The same silhouette, the same color story, the same quiet question: was that ever returned? Because once people are watching, everything becomes a receipt. Stylists clock details. Designers remember dates. Assistants cross-reference past loans like detectives. And suddenly, what once passed as coincidence starts looking like a pattern. And patterns are dangerous, because now the narrative isn't fashion favor gone wrong, it's boundary problem. And the fashion industry has zero patience for boundary problems. Behind closed doors, the tone reportedly shifted from curiosity to containment. Editors started requesting alternatives. Houses began offering equivalents instead of originals. Entire categories quietly vanished from availability lists. And what made it worse? No one explained why. From the outside, it looked like bad luck, scheduling conflicts, seasonal gaps, budget pivots. But inside the rooms where decisions were made, the logic was already settled. Why risk it? Why send a piece you might never see again? Why expose your staff to embarrassment? Why open your archive to someone whose relationship with borrowed seems flexible? And that's the kind of question that never gets answered in your favor. Because here's the harsh truth nobody says publicly: once designers stop trusting you, image collapses faster than any headline could manage. You can have press, you can have cameras, you can have buzz, but without access, style becomes repetitive. Looks start recycling, outfits stop evolving, and people notice. That's when the quiet distancing reportedly extended beyond fashion into social territory. Invitations thinned out, dinners went quiet, events became full, smiles stayed polite, but warmth evaporated. The same circles that once leaned in now leaned away, not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to leave space where closeness used to be. And the Beckhams, they didn't retaliate, they didn't leak, they didn't posture, they did something far colder. They moved on, because Victoria didn't need to make a spectacle. The industry did it for her. Every missing piece rumor became another brick in the wall. Every awkward loan request added weight. Every stylist who hesitated passed that hesitation along. And soon, the reputation wasn't being debated. It was being assumed. That's when the doors didn't just close, they stopped being visible. And the cruelest part, no one ever said the word banned, because bans can be challenged. Silence can't. Silence just happens. And once you realize it's happening, it's usually too late to reverse. Because in fashion, trust is the currency that matters most. And once it's spent recklessly, no title, no spotlight, no narrative can buy it back. What began as a borrowed dress ended as a lesson whispered through ateliers, studios, and showrooms. Some people don't return what they take, and the industry never forgets. Not loudly, not publicly, but permanently.